With that, I think we pass on to our next panel, and I get to introduce the panel, which is so exciting. We're going to hear from Natalie Vega O'Neill, who's the president of the Junior Achievement of Washington, and Nicole Lipkin, who's the CEO of Equilibria Consulting and the founder of Hey Kiddo. They are in conversation with Ted Alden, who is the Ross Distinguished Visiting Professor at Western Washington University. And they're going to continue the theme the theme of the day, which is who is going to run the world and the next future generation of leaders. I'm going to stick behind and hear this one. So with that, I give it over to you.
Thank you very much, Harini. I appreciate the introduction. I think the theme of the day is we all chose blue for our background.
We did.
So I am very pleased to be joined here at the summit by two visionary leaders for this this discussion. They are both have distinguished careers in their field, and you're going to hear a lot more about some of the things they've been involved in. The title of this discussion is a wonderful one, not my idea, so thank you to the organizers. Who is going to run the world? Developing the future generation of leaders. This is something I think a lot about these days. I spent many years with the current generation of political leaders in Washington, D.C., working with the Council on Foreign Relations there. And now I have the privilege to be here at Western trying to do my small part in training the next generation. Hopefully this one will avoid some of the mistakes that mine has made. So we are going to chat for about 25 minutes and then turn to your questions. So please put them in the chat and we will get to as many as possible. Natalie, I want to start with you. In our prep discussion last week, you said something that really struck me. You said, and I think this is a pretty good quote. I used to be a journalist, and I jotted it down accurately. I think you said, "Our country doesn't care about kids, and we don't care about the people who care for kids." Explain what you mean by that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ted, and thanks to everybody. Really happy to be here today, and I so enjoyed the previous conversation. And I think a lot of what Brenda was saying resonates really well, and what Harini was saying resonates really well with our discussion right here. And I think Brenda almost exactly spoke the same words that I said last week, in that, you know, kids don't vote, they don't pay taxes, they're not running for elected office. And so our country isn't designed to advocate for children, nor is it designed to take care of and support people that care for children, parents included. You know, when we think about the work environment and the work structure, work is not designed to support parents. And I think this pandemic and this new virtual world that we're all living in has really shed some light on the inequities, not only of what kids aren't and are getting in school and who's getting something and who isn't getting anything, but then also how parents are supported and how, you know, some parents are able to, you know, work from home and have their kids do virtual learning, but other parents have to continue to go to, you know, their business. There may be an essential worker, or they may work in a hotel, or they may work in a restaurant that's open these days. And I think that, you know, we just aren't, as a country, prioritizing children and putting children's needs first. And I think that that goes along with what the school structure it looks like, how we support students' different needs and different abilities, and also the lack of focus on mental health and wellness in kids as well.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk some more about the things we need to be doing as a country and locally to try to take on some of these challenges. Nicole, I want to turn to you. And similarly, you said in our conversation, and I was not aware of this, I probably should have been, that suicide is the third leading cause of death among children in the country. Why are we facing this sort of crisis among our young people, our children?
It's a pretty alarming statistic when you put it into perspective. And not only is suicide the third leading cause of death in children, anxiety and depression is skyrocketing. And we don't even know yet what the implications will be related to COVID. But what this points to, when you look at suicide and you look at depression, you look at anxiety, you're talking about a matter of coping. You're talking about a matter of coping skills, right? So when we learn coping skills from a young age, and we learn to put them into effect in a positive, useful way, then that can serve as a foundation to help us feel well and feel good, and it can be preventative. The thing is that when we don't build that core foundation, then we lose the preventative ability. So what we're looking at, in my opinion, is really a crisis of coping skills. And it's not to say that coping skills are the cure for anxiety, all mental health issues, but they serve as a foundation. They serve to help us get through times when we need to get through times. And so when you have children that are suffering from a lack of coping skills and their caregivers who are also struggling, well, then you have a system that's struggling with coping skills, right? So these skills can be taught, they can be developed over time. It's just that we need to spend time on them. And more importantly, we need to prioritize them.
Let's talk just a little bit more about that. I mean, how do children learn coping skills? I mean, I think, if all of us are honest with ourselves these days, we're kind of barely coping as adults. So yeah. where are the kids picking up these coping skills from? How do they learn that?
Well, it's interesting. It's, we've in school, we've prioritized different things. And this kind of speaks to what the last panel was speaking about. We've prioritized, and importantly, tests and math and reading, that should be prioritized. But equally important are these social emotional skills, because these social emotional skills help us learn and develop resilience. They help us learn grit. They help us learn how to persevere. They help us learn how to be empathetic, how to develop these interpersonal skills. So these skills are learned through interactions with one another. They're learned through failing and moving through it. They're learned by hearing our caretakers, hearing the struggles and working through that and seeing them model struggles and working through struggles. So it's not hiding. It's not hiding what's going on. It's being vulnerable and talking about it and learning from it.
Yeah, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the impact of the pandemic, but I'm actually going to try to work a question in here already. My wife has been a teacher for years, and I think, a lot of educators have said, well, we're doing everything, right? We're trying to teach all these core subjects. We've got pressure from the federal government to meet these various mandates. This is a lot to ask from educators. Natalie, you mentioned parents and caregivers, how to strengthen their capability, and the question on the chat here, are we not missing the community? What is the support system that makes a better development path for our young people possible? I'll turn to you, Natalie, with that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I would say for us here in Seattle, I would mention a recent Seattle Times opinion article that stated that while the world is indeed grappling with the pandemic, it's students, parents, and educators who are the hardest hit. And I think that, when we talk about fundamental coping skills, it's the perfect way to put it. Of course, reading and math are critical building blocks in every young person's education, but all of those coping skills that Nicole talked about and building a community, how do you interact in the community? How do you positively contribute to a community? Those are the soft skills, right? And I think we all said last week, we don't like it being called soft skills because it makes them sound weak or unimportant. These are really life skills. How are you going to be a successful contributor to society? How are you going to be a successful member of your employer? And I think that, that's a lot of what we do at Junior Achievement. Our work is really focused around building and adding to the supports that teachers are already doing through free programs that are available to educators, but really to be part of every student's education and help them develop, financial management skills. How are they going to achieve financial health and wellness? What is their future going to look like, be it a 2-year, 4-year degree, a tech or apprenticeship opportunity, and then really understanding what a community looks like. We start small in kindergarten talking about what a community looks like within your classroom, within your neighborhood, within your city, within the country, and we build on that through 12th grade so that students really learn what does it mean to be a member of a community? How do you help one another? How do you develop empathy? How do you develop kindness? And so that you can see that when one contributes positively, it really lifts all boats when it comes to being a member of a community and how a community can thrive together.
So I'm going to circle back to the pandemic a little bit, and because a lot of what you're talking about there, it seems to me is particularly challenging right now. If I think about how my kids learned community skills. After school programs were really important. Weekend sports and coaching were really important. Girl Scouts and other kinds of things. So there is a whole kind of structure of which junior achievement is an important part. But a lot of that sort of assumes that we're actually getting together and creating that kind of community. What is the pandemic meant in terms of trying to deliver some of these services, trying to give kids some of what they need? You hear from parents, my kid's sitting in front of a screen all day, trying to get some sort of education from the other end. Nicole, why don't I start with you? But I'd really be interested both in your comments, both professionally and what you've observed just in your circles of friends.
So I think there's a really great opportunity here. So I think, first of all, thinking about, look, the pandemic is hard on everyone. This has been just beyond and extremely taxing on everyone, but it's a real opportunity for caretakers, for parents at home, to have these really difficult, important conversations with their kids. Because yes, in the past, we kind of outsourced these conversations or this skill building to team sports, to after school programs, to all of that. But now it's an opportunity to teachers, but now it's an opportunity to bring it home and to start having honest, difficult conversations, so that conversations about difficult topics actually become comfortable over time. Like, that was the whole premise of Hey Kiddo when we developed it. It's like, we're kind of bringing conversations back home. So
sorry, what does that involve? What do you do under Hey Kiddo? Just explain that quickly, because what's the program there?
Hey Kiddo, it's about building leadership, social and emotional skills in kids, but also their parents. So it's giving conversation starters, coaching tips, activities to parents to help build it, versus outsourcing it just to schools. Because the bottom line is that if it's just in schools and kids are just learning it in schools, and they come home, or these after school activities, all that, then they come home, and if it's not being modeled at home, there's a break. And we know with learning and development with children, especially with these skills and lifelong coping skills or life skills, as Natalie said, it has to be 360, it has to be everywhere. So starting to have the conversations at an early age, and they're awkward at first, right? They're awkward, but starting to have them so that eventually they become not awkward. So I think there's a great opportunity right now, because so much is happening in our environment. You can talk about politics, you can talk about race, you can talk about struggling, you can talk, like, being vulnerable during this time is important. So kids can model what it looks like to work through something in a healthy, adaptive way. So I really do think there's a great opportunity, but we need to encourage these conversations, because sometimes it just feels completely overwhelming. But all the day-to-day stuff that's happening, there's so much to talk about at the dinner table, or before bed, or when waking up, or whenever.
Natalie, kind of the same thing. Some of your thoughts on the particular challenges of the pandemic, but then also, if you could say, these are the skills that kids need to develop, that, this is what would make a strong young person who can develop into a future leader. What would some of those be? What would that list look like?
Yeah, I think that the pandemic really has, shaken everything to its core, right? Our working and professional worlds, our personal worlds, education, business, commerce, everything is. And so I think that when it comes to education, teachers are doing their absolute best. I have absolutely no doubt about that. I have twin 6-year-olds who are in first grade, and I see it every single day, that their teachers trying to be as creative and inclusive as possible and still focus on social emotional needs of the kids. And that's really difficult to do, through a computer, right? Through a screen. But I do see it every day. My daughter was crying last week and said, I just want to be in the building. I just want to be in the building. And some days with working from home, I say, I just want to be in the building as well. I would love to get away from home for a little while. But I think, to Nicole's point, talking about it is really, really a crucial initial step. I would also point out that, we're talking about kids in this context, but it's also so important that our professional environments, specifically for teachers as well, if we're talking about educators, are allowing for that space and the opportunity for the adults to have those conversations as well, and to say, I'm not having that great of a day, or this is giving me anxiety, or it's weighing on me that I'm not connecting, with students right now. No educator went into the profession to be a remote instructor. I can guarantee you that every single educator, especially, K through 12, really wanted to be in the classroom with kids. And so when we talk about the skill building, I think that it's so crucial and so important, the things that we've mentioned, having empathy and having compassion and being a helper and trying to be a friend to people. And then, of course, when you think more about how those soft skills around teamwork and collaboration and presentation styles and communication, the interpersonal skills as well, are so critical. And I think that, understanding these skills and giving kids a head start on developing these skills really puts students at a distinct advantage as they get older and go into, the economy and the professional working world and understand how they're going to survive, the unknowns and unexpected crises that we all have to deal with, either at a macro level, which we're doing right now as a globe, or at the micro level individually as well.
Nicole, did you want to add on to this? Add on to that in terms of the list of things or the different ideas about what you'd like to see kids growing up with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I agree with everything Natalie said. I think some of the other skills I would definitely want to see is this is a real chance to develop resilience. Because look, for all of us, but that is a life skill that takes you so far. And, and also mindfulness, and learning how to manage stress and manage emotions. So I think those, just all the social emotional skills are just so vital right now, and such great opportunity to do it right now.
Yeah, no, the resilience piece is enormous. Natalie, we talked a bit about this, and and it's come up in the previous discussions as well, which is mentorship. I mean, what difference does it make to have something as simple as adult volunteers coming into classrooms and sharing their life or career experiences with children?
It's so impactful for all of the reasons that we've talked about, all the reasons that were mentioned in the previous discussion, but really the volunteers and the impact on mentors that I've seen through my work at Junior Achievement has really been the most inspiring. The volunteers and mentors are the backbone of our organization, and it's really that in an interactive live learning at its best that can happen. I'm always blown away by the statistic that 1 in 5 Junior Achievement alumni go into the same field as their in-classroom volunteer. And so when people think about the kind of direct impact they want to have on the life of the youth, I think mentorship and volunteerism is just such a critical way to do it. And, you can teach a student a concept, but to really make an impact, we've found that having personal stories and connections from a volunteer really helps to make these concepts real and meaningful for young people. And that's where the magic happens. We know that a mentor on a student can really inspire them to pursue education, or as I said, a career path in the same field. And that gives them a sense of empowerment, and it really allows them to see themselves, achieving dreams and goals that they wouldn't have otherwise because of the influence of the mentor or volunteer on their life. It's incredibly powerful.
Just actually practically, I'm fairly new to Washington State. How do you recruit mentors? I mean, if someone, listens to this discussion and they say, gee, that's something I'd like to do. How do you go about recruiting those mentors? How do you get them involved?
It's all, our Junior Achievement, our programs, as I said, all of our in-classroom programs are free. They're at no cost to educators at all. And we want volunteers from all around the state. And so anybody that's interested in volunteering can go to our website at juniorachievementofwashington.org and sign up to volunteer. And we'll match you with classrooms in your particular region. Of course, this year, right now, it's all virtual. So we're doing our best to make them as interactive and impactful as possible. We've had to we pivoted pretty hard in March to go from a traditional in-person model to a virtual model, but we're having huge success there. And we want people from all types of industries, all types of fields, all different walks of life, because again, we really feel that the personal stories, the personal journeys have the greatest impact on students.
So I want to ask you both. Part of the title of this panel is leadership. So we should care about children and young people because we should care about children and young people. We want their lives to be as rich as possible. We don't want them to struggle with poverty and hunger and homelessness and racial discrimination and a whole long list of bad things. But at the end of the day, we're also talking about bringing up a generation that's going to do a good job running the business and the nonprofits and the government agencies of the future. Nicole, start off. Talk to us a little bit about how these skills you're talking about here serve to develop adults who are going to be responsible in the world, who are going to be good leaders.
Yeah, so the work that I do leadership development, executive coaching, and consultation with organizations around the world. And it's very interesting because with the executive teams I work with, there's always similar complaints about young professionals coming in and not having, not being able to handle feedback well, wanting to be promoted quickly, not having an accurate measuring stick, all of this stuff, not being able to work on teams, all of this stuff. So there's an expectation when people enter the workforce that they're all of a sudden going to know how to work with other people, work on teams, be able to accept and receive and give feedback. Well, all of this stuff. But the thing is, in reality, those are all learned skills. Those are the soft skills. And you don't learn them unless you develop them. Team skills. We assume everyone knows how to work on a team. Most people don't know how to work on a team unless they've been part of team sports or entrepreneurial group projects or things like that. Most of us don't know how to. We've only been exposed to little group projects for a week or something like that. So the reality is all of these skills are learned and developed over time, but we can't expect all of a sudden when you get a job, there they are. They have to start early. And we need to stop complaining. So I think organizations can do so much to really start helping communities and schools and children develop these skills early on. It's not just about the career fair. It's about getting in early. It's not just about high school students, right? Or college students. We should be getting into, organizations should be connecting with middle schools, with elementary schools. And like Natalie was saying, it's such a profound experience to hear a professional talk and have a mentor talk. Well, it's the same thing, learning about different businesses and different companies and being part of different events or anything that can involve kids. It's also incredibly rewarding for employees of organizations when you talk about the importance of meaning at work, being able to be involved with mentoring children or whatever it might be, running little entrepreneurial experiments or whatever it might be. But these skills are developed and they're learned, but it can't just start at 20 when you enter the professional workforce.
Yeah, just to follow up quickly, and Natalie, please weigh in on this too. I think, we often see leadership as a kind of specialized skill, right? That most of us don't really need leadership skills. Most of us are going to go get a job. But I think that's very kind of outdated thinking. I mean, I was involved in a panel discussion earlier this week about what they call the FAME program, which is bringing young people into manufacturing careers. A lot of it essentially just involving auto plant work at the start, but the modern model of automobile manufacturing is these small teams are all working pretty independently. And for them to be effective, they have to identify problems, they have to be able to solve those problems, they have to be able to bring them up to the chain. I mean, part of what it seems to me you're saying is that leadership is not a specialized skill in the world. It's a skill that all young people need to learn to succeed in a whole variety of careers that they might pursue in their lives.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also that, youth have to be given the opportunity to lead as well. And so they have to be given opportunities to, as Nicole was saying, to work in teams, but problem solving is a big piece of it as well. I remember, in my early 20s, at a leadership retreat, one of the big questions was, are leaders born or is leadership, natural? Are you born with leadership or is it something that you can develop? And I really do think that when given the opportunity, you can grow into being a leader and everybody just needs the opportunity. I think that it comes, with access and equity and equality issues, that all students are given those opportunities as well, and they have resources available to them so that they can engage in those small group settings and team settings so that they can test out their different skill set. And that's really what we try to do is to be available to all students, no matter where they live, what school they go to, or whatever their community, has available to them, that we can provide them those empowering opportunities to lead.
We've got some good questions coming in, so let me turn to some of them. So question here, unfortunately, soft skills aren't tested K-12. I mean, I guess at least not in any kind of formal way, which means they aren't a significant portion of the curriculum. The question is, how can business help support this type of education in schools? This is a fascinating question, of course, because business in a lot of ways has driven the focus on harder skills, on math and science skills in the school. If you look at education reform initiatives in this country going back to the late 1980s with the George H.W. Bush administration and the Charlottesville summit. So I kind of like that question. I mean, I don't want to set this up as a competition because our kids need both hard skills and soft skills, but how do you incorporate this stuff more effectively into the curriculum at every level? Nicole, why don't you start with that? But I'd be interested in Natalie as well.
Well, I do think it's changing. I absolutely do think it's changing. And I think it's changing because, number one, people are alarmed at what's happening, again, with mental health issues, with coping skills, with bullying. With some of the very traumatic events we've seen at school. So people are starting to see, and there's also been organizationally, like some of the big companies, Google put out major research saying, hey, these soft skills, again, I hate that term, but these soft skills actually make a difference academically, in the workforce, and professionally and personally throughout life. So the research has come out, we're supporting it, we're seeing how important it is. But I think businesses could really be creative with this, again, because you either have to, you have to put your money where your mouth is and either stop complaining and do something about it. But I think one of the things that businesses can do, we can make this fun. Again, like I was saying, it's an engagement tactic for employees to get involved with this outside of work. It's kind of like those fun projects that can keep, it's like volunteerism, keeping people engaged. But delivering, again, I keep on saying entrepreneurial kind of games or competitions or things like that, things where students can learn together and learn to work together, not only for the outcome of the product or outcome of whatever they're pitching, but also get feedback on how they worked with one another, learn to give feedback to their peers, how they manage their emotions during it. All of that stuff can be incorporated in these fun competitions or these fun pitch days or whatever it might be. There's so many different things that businesses can do. I'm focusing more on entrepreneurial stuff because that's also something that's rising, with Shark Tank and all of that. Kids are really excited about that stuff. They're excited to put business ideas together. We can just tap into that and integrate the leadership development as part of it. It doesn't just have to be the pitch and the product.
Fabulous. Natalie, other thoughts on things business can and should be doing that encourage some of what we've been talking about on this panel here?
Well, I mean, I believe that the whole entire K-12 system needs an overhaul. That's where I am. And so I agree with the question about, we're not testing soft skills. I think it's more of when we think about what we're dealing with right now, are we using this opportunity to step back and rethink core curriculum and requirements for students in schools? Because I think that that's where we're going to see the most change, because we aren't testing soft skills. We aren't thinking about social emotional skills, and we're not, valuing those skills and mastering those skills in students as much as we are with, math and reading and writing and science. And so I really do think that, our K-12 system was built for an agrarian society, which we no longer are. And I think that it really does need a whole overhaul, especially when we talk about mental health and wellness and what we really want to focus on with kids to make, our next generation of leaders educated, compassionate, considerate, kind, resilient leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll throw in my little 2 cents worth here is I'd love to see business adopt the model that a lot of law firms have, where lawyers are doing a certain percentage of pro bono work. I do a lot of work on immigration and asylum issues, and a lot of that work is being done by lawyers working for firms on a pro bono basis. Imagine a model where businesses expected their people, I don't know, 4 hours a week or 10 hours a month or whatever it is to do community work. And that was actually part of their expectation on the job. So they weren't just supposed to serve the company, they were supposed to serve the broader community.
And we're seeing a lot more of that because we have so many corporate partnerships at Junior Achievement in Washington, and we see that often. There are so many businesses in our region that not only encourage it, but they give their employees paid time off. And so it absolutely is becoming part of, I would say, core culture of businesses, especially in the Pacific Northwest, to honor and value this and support their employees in giving back.
Very encouraging. Thank you. It was not exactly a question, but it circles back to the pandemic a bit. It was on mentorship. The point being that, this is very much a face-to-face personal activity. Again, I think we've all been struggling with this in different ways. I'm teaching at the university, and we do office hours online now, and trying to figure out ways to kind of be compassionate and reach out to our students virtually. Do either of you have good ideas about how, because we may be in this for a while, about how we try to fill in the best we can some of these challenges while we're still stuck mostly in this virtual environment?
I would say, I'll chime in here. I would say this is part of our reality, and the truth is that things probably, when we are coming back, it's going to look different. So again, I hate to bring this to an opportunity, but I also think it's an opportunity to learn to read people, because we're used to being together. And even with mentorship, we're used to reading energy and reading the room and people's body language. We only can see now this, right? But we're going to get better over time interpreting what this is and interpreting the virtual energy that happens. And I think this is a skill that we're going to all need to learn and get better with. So even though, it was a face-to-face thing, it's not a face-to-face thing now. So we need to adapt and push ourselves to adapt that way. And hopefully we will come back together, but this will always exist. So again, it's an opportunity to learn to kind of sharpen our body language reading skills and abilities. I also think it's important to do even more of the checking in than ever before. I think at this point, sometimes it's hard to say, I'm still suffering or I'm still struggling, but having those conversations and being vulnerable yourself through mentorship and through these conversations is imperative to let people know it's okay to keep on struggling. And if they're feeling the feels, to keep on feeling the feels and keep talking about it.
Thank you, Nicole. Natalie.
I would just add, I think adults are much more uncomfortable with virtual relationships than our youth are. Honestly, I mean, the youth of today are masters of creating virtual relationships and online relationships. Thinking about all the gaming that happens, and I don't even understand. And relationship, they're talking to people virtually from all over the world. And so I do think that you can create relationships virtually. Of course, it's not ideal. Of course, nothing can substitute, face to face. But I wouldn't let this distance, this physical distance that we're all experiencing right now, stop anyone from, if they're interested in becoming a mentor. Because I still think, what kids want most of all are people that are going to show up for them, that they can rely on, that are going to advocate for them, and that think that they're the most special person on the planet. And I think that we can each do our own part in making that happen for our youth.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask you, we've got about 2 minutes left here. So I'm going to ask you what I always asked as a reporter. And sometimes I got my best stories out of this. Is there something that I should have asked you about that I didn't? Some good thought you want to leave the group with here? Nicole, let's start with you, and then we'll finish off with Natalie. What should I have raised that I didn't? What keeps you up at night?
Oh man, my kid keeps me up at night. But besides that,
oh, baby.
I think let Natalie go first. I'm going to think.
Sounds good. Natalie, I'm going to put you on the spot. And sometimes that happened when I'd ask people, and they say, "Nah, you asked me everything." So, Natalie.
I would say, I think, a lot of what we've talked about, I really do worry about the lack of connections and the lack of in-person connections, especially for kids, especially for the younger kids. I have twins, and so I really do believe that we have been so fortunate during this that they have one another. I think families with siblings have been really fortunate that kids have one another. I couldn't imagine, having an only child and how you would really want to navigate that peer-to-peer connection. But I think that, I as a parent, and as an educator, am going to, demand that we advocate for whenever we go back to in-person education or in-person gatherings. And I would demand that we advocate that there's a lot more time focused on social emotional development because of this crises, right? This mental health and wellness crises that we've all been experiencing from, this separation that's occurred since March. And so I think that, again, I'm optimistic that we can make it happen. But I do worry about that. And I do worry about, the overall economic fallout that this pandemic has had on women in the workforce. I think that, a lot of people have heard it called a she session instead of a recession. And I know so many women, even just from my, groups that have left the workforce because they're the primary caregiver. And all the advancements that women have made over the past, centuries are really going to take a step backwards. So.
Yeah, I hope we're going to talk about that other times in the conference. Nicole, you left yourself with 15 seconds here, so you got to finish up quickly here.
Quickly.
Good.
Okay. Obviously, this pandemic has shown the inequality that exists. What does keep me up at night is how to get these social emotional tools into the hands of people that can't afford it or whose schools can't afford it. That I can't figure out how to do that. That's what keeps me up at night. And I'm trying to figure that out myself. So
yeah.
Solutions.
Look, wonderful. I want to thank both of you for a really rich discussion. And also, I think, a kind of call to do something for, people on this call to say this is going to take all of us to tackle these problems. You can't just leave them to other people, that we need to step up and volunteer and do things. So thank you very much.